Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Lisa Keys, and I'm the Special Projects Editor at 70FacesMedia. And again, thank you for joining us tonight for From Rupture to Resilience, Weaving New Narratives of Hope. Tonight's webinar is the second in a series of events designed to help our audience cultivate a deeper sense of self, vitality, and joy even when faced with challenging circumstances, that's supported by UJA Federation of New York. I am so excited to introduce you all tonight to Dr. Shelly Steinwurtzel and Dr. Jessica Zmood, who will be sharing with us strategies for Jewish resilience and post-traumatic growth. To give you a little bit of background about our doctors and our speakers tonight, Dr. Shelly Steinwurtzel is a licensed clinical psychologist in New York and Florida, and also the co-founder of Gesher Community Care, a nonprofit that she helped launch in response to rising antisemitism affecting individuals seeking mental health support. Shelly's clinical work spans hospital, neonatal, and community settings. In addition to Gesher Community Care, Shelly maintains a private practice in Westchester, New York, while serving as a clinical psychologist for the neonatal comfort care program at Columbia University Irving Medical Center. She is deeply committed to culturally responsive, trauma-informed care and to strengthening pathways to safely support Jewish communities. Dr. Jessica Zmood is also a New York State licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in Manhattan since 2010. She is also the co-founder and director of the nonprofit mental health organization Gesher Community Care. She earned her bachelor's degree from Washington University in St. Louis and completed her master's and doctoral degrees at Yeshiva University's Furkov Graduate School of Psychology. Dr. Zmood trained at Mount Sinai's Addiction Institute, North General Hospital, the New York State Psychiatric Institute, and Lincoln Medical Center, specializing in psychological assessments and cognitive behavioral treatment with diverse and Spanish-speaking populations. Her clinical expertise includes anxiety, depression, stress management, identity development, relationship challenges, and addiction. She works with adults, adolescents, and couples. As a Level 2 certified Gottman therapist, she treats complex relational issues, including trauma, infidelity, and co-occurring disorders. Now, before we get started, I just want to take a second to let everyone know the format of tonight's event. Our fabulous doctors will begin the program with a brief, about 20-minute presentation, and then we will move on to a conversation as well as a question and answer session. So at any point during their talk or our conversation, if you have any questions, I invite each of you to write it in the chat, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So now, without further ado, I'd love to turn things over to Jessica Zmood. Take it away, Jess.
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me okay? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of Shelly, myself, and Gesher Community Care, we want to thank you all for spending the next hour with us. We also want to express our appreciation to 70 Faces Media, MyJewishLearning, and Kveller for this wonderful opportunity. Now to begin. It feels especially fitting that this talk is happening during the counting of the Omer. We are now on a 49-day journey from Passover to Shavuot, a movement from freedom towards purpose, one day at a time. And many of us have been counting in a very different way these past couple of years. We've been counting days, waiting, holding on to the hope that we could finally stop having to say, bring them home. There's something about counting that reflects how we cope. When things feel overwhelming, we break time down. One day, one step, one moment at a time. And we are not the only ones who've been counting. Bar Cooperstein, who spent 738 days in captivity, described it this way. In your head, you count every day. That's how you keep yourself busy. Every day I stayed alive was a miracle. Blindfolded, unable to speak, counting was one of the only ways she was able to mark time and keep her hope alive. And for families of those held captive, the counting looked different, but it carried the same weight. As the days stretched on, many shared fears they never imagined having to name. We never imagined that the clock would reach 3 digits, and we feared it would reach 4. That kind of counting is not just about time. It's about holding on to something when everything else feels uncertain. This week includes two powerful days on our Jewish calendar. Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, when we honor those who have been lost, and immediately after Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, a celebration of life and renewal. In Judaism, grief and rebuilding sit side by side. We remember and then we rebuild. This rhythm teaches us something essential, not just how we survive hardship, but how we grow through it. It's not just resilience getting through something. It's what psychology calls post-traumatic growth. What that means is this. We don't go back to who we were before something difficult or traumatic happened. We are changed by it. But that change isn't only loss. It can also be growth. And sometimes growth doesn't mean moving on from pain. It means learning how to carry our pain. And Eli Sharabi expressed this so beautifully. He said, I live with grief. I carry it with me everywhere, alongside life, not in its place. And that is the essence of what we mean by growing forward. We don't replace the pain, but we learn how to hold both pain and possibility. So instead of bouncing back, we grow forward into a new version of ourselves that carries both the pain and the meaning that comes from it. When this talk was first conceptualized, it was, did I bounce out? Sorry, I'm not sure what just happened. Sorry about that. When this talk was first conceptualized, it was several months after the hostages had come home. And there was relief, real relief, a sense that maybe we could finally exhale. And many of us did. But that exhale brought something more complicated with it. What now? How do we begin to process everything that just happened? Personally, and I think many of us felt this, there wasn't a clear moment to begin grieving. The hostages were home, but the pain didn't resolve. The loss, the antisemitism, the ongoing conflict, all of it continued. So we're left in this in-between space, still reacting, still trying to make sense of it. So instead of closure, there's an ongoing state of waiting, just trying to make sense. In psychology, we call this ambiguous loss. When you don't fully know, are we mourning or are we still holding our breaths? And at the same time, it wasn't one event, it was a series of traumatic events, one after the other, without space to fully process them. Israelis are still living in that reality every day. And for many Jews in the diaspora, this was something new. We weren't just watching from afar, but we were feeling it personally. We're experiencing identity-based threats in our schools, our workplaces, our communities, while everything was unfolding in Israel in real time. And beneath that, something deeper, something we don't always name, intergenerational trauma. For many of us, history isn't just something we learn about, it's something we are carrying. So yes, there's real pain here, and it matters that we name it. And I want to pause for a moment because some of you might be thinking, what is this? I came to this webinar to hear and learn something hopeful. And that is completely fair. And that's where I want to be clear. We are not staying in the trauma. Our tradition doesn't allow us to stay there. Even in our mourning, there is movement. We don't stay in that first stage forever. We begin to re-enter life, slowly, gently, not because the pain disappears, but because life continues and we are meant to continue with it. The Omer reflects this idea too. Each day is counted. Each day matters in its own way. Not because time alone heals, but because growth happens gradually. And that's what many of us have been doing, finding small ways to cope, to connect, to show up for each other, checking in on a friend, showing up at a gathering, holding space. Not big dramatic moments, but small, consistent ones. And those moments matter because they remind us that we are still here and we are still connected. As Rachel Goldberg Polin said, hope is mandatory. And that's not because things are okay. It's because giving up is not an option. Hope in this context is something we choose. And when we start to look for it, we begin to see something else alongside the pain. We see people holding on to identity. We see connections forming in unlikely places. We see meaning being created, even in darkness. And that's where we're going tonight. Because if we look closely, we can see how people grow, even in the darkest of places. Shelly, you're muted.
Thank you. Inside the tunnels, something remarkable was happening. Hostages under conditions of extreme deprivation were finding ways to remain human. Agam Berger said, "You can't take away my free will, and you can't take away my Judaism." She kept Shabbat. She observed holidays. In a place that was designed to strip her identity, Jewish ritual became her declaration. I still exist, and I still exist as a proud Jew. Eli Sharabi reflected, I feel a connection to my people. It reminds me why I must survive. Connection became a psychological anchor. Hostages supported one another, shared what little they had, created micro communities in impossible conditions, because survival is rarely an individual act. Hirsch Goldberg Polin held on to this idea. He who has a why can bear any how. Meaning was survival, not only for him while he could, but he imparted this to everyone he encountered from Israel during his time in the tunnels. And this has been reported a saving grace for so many of them, a purpose for them to survive as well. Hostages described creating internal worlds, replaying memories, imagining future meals and conversations with loved ones. Because when the external world is stripped away, the mind becomes the last place of freedom. Omer Wenkert shared a remarkable example when I heard him speak. He described how he and fellow hostages created Friday night movie nights. Each week, one person would choose their favorite movie and retell it, scene by scene, in vivid detail. They would sit together and imagine it, frame by frame, character by character, emotion by emotion. There was no screen, no sound, only their voices, their minds, and their togetherness. And still they built a screen for each other, together. This wasn't distraction. This was defiance. Not just surviving in hell, but insisting on living as fully as possible within it. Even in captivity, there were moments, small and fleeting, of humor. Noah Argamani and others described the surreal coexistence of fear and brief human interaction, not because the situation wasn't horrific, but because humor is not denial. It can be regulation. It's the psyche's way of saying, still here. And outside the tunnels, we were doing something strikingly similar. We created rituals in addition to our Jewish rituals. We had rallies. We made posters and stickers and advocated. These were not just symbolic acts. They restored agency and they created connection. They gave us a way to act in the face of our helplessness. And they reminded us that we are not alone. But there was another layer of loss. Many people experienced rupture in friendships, communities, and professional spaces. I know that we did. A sense of betrayal, that too is grief. And yet, what did we do? We rebuilt. New communities, new connections. We found each other again, because this is what Jews have always done. I grew up with a story about my grandmother, Dora, may she rest in peace. During a death march from Auschwitz, she broke her ankle, and her two sisters stood more closely next to her to hold her up. They physically carried her so she could keep moving. That is how she survived. Not alone, together. And that is how we survive too. There's a teaching, a little bit of darkness, a little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. Resilience is that light. It helps us endure, it helps us cope. But post-traumatic growth is something more. It requires rupture, it requires vulnerability, and it leads to transformation. A reordering of priorities, a deepening of meaning, a shift in identity, not bouncing back, building forward. The Omer teaches us to count, one day at a time, not because time alone heals, but because meaning is built incrementally. After October 7th, we counted everything, days, names, lives, because we understand something fundamental. Every person is an entire world. And what we witnessed, both inside the tunnels and outside of them, was something extraordinary. Even when everything is stripped away, people turn to ritual, people turn to connection, people create meaning, people imagine, people even create something like a movie in complete darkness. Not because they are untouched by suffering, but because they are human. Even in tunnels, they found ways to be human. And that is not just survival. That is resilience. And beyond that, that is the beginning of growth. Thank you.
Wow, I would just take a moment to breathe and take that in. Thank you so much for that really moving and inspiring presentation. Already, I have a lot of food for thought and a lot to ask you about. Just a reminder to everyone here at home, please, if you have any questions for our doctors, please put them in the chat, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. Just type it in there, and then we will happy to get the questions to our wonderful presenters here. But I will kick things off with a few questions of my own. I think it's important, and as you discussed, to note that I would assume that the majority of us here tonight are American Jews who, did not experience October 7th or the war firsthand. But nonetheless, as you said, we're all trying to find our footing right now in a really uncertain world in which anti-Semitic or anti-Israel sentiment is really increasingly prevalent. So I'd love to start off by asking a few questions about the psychological principles that you spoke about. And then I hope we can turn our attention to some practical strategies for moving forward in our lives with some feelings of hope and joy. So to start, Jess, you mentioned specifically ambiguous loss, which I guess we describe as the state of not having a clear beginning or end to the grieving process. I really feel like that term says so much in just two words, and it really encapsulates what so many of us are feeling right now. Um, how do we navigate this? And do you have any suggestions for specific strategies or tools that we can employ in this process when reality seems so uncertain?
No, that is a wonderful question. I think that one, acknowledging the ambiguity is really important to sort of understand what this is. I think an example of this could be having a family member who has cognitive decline or dementia.
Mm,
Um, they're there, but they're not there. So there's loss and grief without a clear beginning and a clear ending, sort of a similar experience in that way. Um, and that confusion between what do I grieve? When do I grieve? How do I grieve? Um, and I think there are probably a few different ways we can think about that. Um, One is the meaning piece, is finding meaning in and being able to honor what was and finding new meaning in the new situation we're in.
hmm
Um, Even if it feels in between and confusing. Um, I think as Shelly said, always looking for your why. Um, and I think one of the ways that we do that is through rituals. And I think certainly speaking for us, we have created rituals where we have groups that we check in with. Some people who never lit Shabbos candles before on a Friday night are now starting to light to feel that closeness. Um, some people are starting to go to synagogue when they never did, and others have rituals of like stickering or whatever it is, doing things with your children. And I think we also can have rituals that honor the loss even without closure. And I think another area, and it's something we could talk about later in the discussion, is the ambiguous loss of like friendships we had
hmm
or people we worked with that there wasn't a fight that happened or a confrontation, but sort of like people stop checking in, people stop reaching out.
hmm
Um, you don't get invited to the drinks after work, and sort of like feeling relationships and friendships slipping away. Um, and how to cope with that loss. And part of that is the rebuilding.
hmm
And I think so many of us, I even see someone on this Zoom now who is a friend that Shelly and I, a fellow therapist that Shelly and I met in the wake of all of our loss of October 7th when we were looking for mental health professionals to connect to, that were in the same space as us, having also experienced anti-Semitism in our field.
hmm
So, I think we have so much gratitude for the new relationships we built also. And the other thing is like the balance of reality and hope is learning to tolerate the loss and the bad stuff. Um, and acknowledging where we are, and then being able to hope and play and imagine for something better. I don't know if that answered the question.
Well, I really appreciate. I'm sorry, Shelly. Did you want to add to that before I?
So that was amazing. And another piece about ambiguous loss that sometimes comes up in other situations is when other people aren't aware of your loss because it's
Mm,
not an obvious loss. It's not a known like it's not that you're like the example of a parent sort of developing dementia and becoming you're losing the parent you knew or the person you knew, but they're still there. There's another, that's applicable to this situation as well, because for many of us, the losses that just described, whether it was from friends and colleagues or the experience of losing your safety as a Jew in the world, or that felt safety, that psychological safety as a Jew in the world, or your feeling unable to, your connection to Israel feels, um, abused in some way by others. We're walking through the world in a way that other people don't recognize the grief that we're
Mm,
holding, and
hmm
that is can be part of the ambiguous loss, because your selfhood and your internal identity and what your state is at this point, is not reflected or mirrored back to you when you're in communities outside of the Jewish communities that are experiencing what we're experiencing, the same kinds of loss. So that's another layer of ambiguous loss, and it speaks
hmm
to like how we walk in the world additionally, beyond how we're feeling it internally.
Right. And I think you raised a really good point. I think a lot of people, and myself included, of just, not receiving any sort of communication from anyone in the wake of October 7th and the ongoing war, or when things would happen, just the silence felt
Mhm.
deafening. And this situation is ongoing, when if you run into a protest or somebody says something hurtful. Um,
Mhm.
how how does one even respond to that? If there's silence around you, is it incumbent upon us to say, "Hey, I'm hurting. Can you help me?" Or what would you recommend that a Jewish individual do in this case, who might feel isolated from the communities around them and the people around them?
Um, do you want me to?
You take it. It's okay.
Okay. Um, I think that's a very individual, like the answer is very specific to the individual. And it's really interesting because in the work that I do with grieving parents, I tell them I wish I could hand you a manual and say, do this
Mm,
and you'll be better. Because there's nothing worse than trying to navigate that kind of loss. So with that, what I talk about with them is, well, let's play it out. What feels comfortable for you? And you might have a different answer depending on who you're encountering. So, you know, for some people, they want the whole world to know.
mhm,
Right? I'm one of those people, and it's annoying to my children and my husband, and but I wear my Judaism in a very loud and proud way, but that's just me. And
mhm,
but that's not for everybody, right? And so when you are and I don't so when we walk out into the world and we can think about, well, A, is this a safe place to be loudly Jewish? Do I want to talk to which friends might be receptive to responding in kind, right? Who will be able to take it? Like, for example, with one of my friends, we went for a walk and she was I mean, I was so appreciative for her honesty. I said, it was a few weeks after October 7th, and I said, I feel so isolated from all of my non-Jewish friends because nobody's checked in. Like my world is rocked right now. We've lost, there was we all know what happened. And she, in a very honest and innocent way, she just said, I just didn't think that this, like, you're not Israeli. I didn't think it would affect you like this. And it gave
mm,
me a moment to like pause and say, yeah, of course, why would you? This is a very unique Jewish experience of being part of Am Yisrael and having that connection to Israel. It's not the same, I think, for most people who aren't living in Israel, who aren't from a country, right? Like unless you're really closely connected to a place, whether it's Ireland or Spain, it doesn't affect people in the same way as I think many Jews have been affected. And so those are moments that, you create an opportunity to engage and allow your friends to, or your colleagues to say, how do I do this with you? How do I walk this path with you in a way that is helpful and genuine and kind? Right. And then we get to decide that. But for other people, they might not want to talk about it. They might not want, they might want to engage with their grief within the community of people who are grieving similarly. So how my like toolkit is it's like a pick your own adventure, or like in the NICU, I used to tell people, I'm going to give you a smorgasbord of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because we're in New York, that was very well understood. And and I'm like, some of them you're going to know right away. Like, listen to your gut. Your gut's going to say, oh, no, that's not for me. And I'm going to say, great, throw that one out. That's not going on your plate. Right. But what are some other, then, and you just go through different options. And so this is another, we talked a lot about the imagination and playfulness that the hostages used as a way of not only surviving, but really defiantly living in captivity.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, I think we all live in different types of mental captivity at times, and imagination and playfulness, and just like, what about this? What about that? That gives us opportunity to think flexibly and kind of role play. Okay, that feels really good. That feels really uncomfortable. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. And then you know a little bit more about yourself in this process.
Mm.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. As one of our participants, Diane, pointed out, she was suggesting that we talk a bit about how we identify with our people, saying that how we walk in the world is really a great way to articulate what you were talking about.
Mm.
Yeah. Um,
Now, I had an additional question, Shelly. In drawing a comparison to the counting of the Omer, you suggest that growth happens gradually, one day at a time, and that meaning is built incrementally. So, for those of us who are feeling very overwhelmed right now, what would you suggest as that first small step of movement or rebuilding? Like, what would that actually look like in our daily lives right now?
It might be as simple as going for a walk. It might actually involve physical movement because a lot of stress is held in our bodies. And so if we allow ourselves some time and space to move, we can actually just physically release some of that stress. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes along with what Jess was saying, we have to acknowledge a situation before we can begin to build on top of that, right? And begin to grow. Um, and we have to be able to bounce back before we can bounce, like really build forward. So whatever your coping mechanisms have always been, utilize them. Um, I think building also, like, just, rituals, the reason we focused on these themes of ritual, connection, counting, right? And I'm not suggesting that everybody develop a counting obsession.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly, we're not looking for OCD here. That's not the goal. But um, in the Omer, in when we're counting the Omer, one of the things that we're doing is we've just been, released from captivity in Egypt from in the Passover story, and we're anticipating the arrival and acceptance of the Torah, and at Shavuot, and we don't know. There's this whole period of uncertainty, and there's both excitement and there's like rebellion or misbehavior, right? And so I think it teaches a beautiful lesson about how we build. We build because we build through making mistakes. We grow through making mistakes, and we're going to take two steps forward and maybe one step back, and maybe we're going to find the beauty in the world, and that's part of how we build. Like, I'm looking out my window and I see the sun sort of reflecting, shining on the trees and the leaves and, outside my window. And like that moment of saying, oh, that's really beautiful. It can be part of a building process because
Mm-hmm.
it's how we begin to sort of soothe our system, reduce some of the stress. And then that allows me to say, okay, I can think a little bit more clearly. What's important to me? what do I want to do with the time that I have?
Mhm.
So building rituals, developing connection, finding purpose and meaning, and our Jewish traditions have so much to tell us about
Mhm.
that.
Hmm.
Now, going back to ritual, as you just mentioned, from a psychological standpoint, why are rituals so effective in restoring a sense of control when everything feels out of control in the external world? Why does this work?
I think it's building a habit, essentially.
Hmm.
It's predictable. You can do it if you want to do it daily at the same time every day. So it's something you can rely on when the world around you feels unreliable, and it helps you feel a sense of control. And if it's a specific Jewish ritual, and especially if done in a communal setting, it helps you feel connected to your people and your history. And certainly if you share it with your children, what came before us and what we're building now and what will continue. Um, and I see in the chat there's lots of questions about or a question about kids and differences between
Hmm.
parents and children. And yes. Yeah.
So if we can address that now, because I think that's a really wonderful
Yeah.
question and one that I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are experiencing right now. I'll just read it quickly just to make sure everyone can see or hear it. It says a participant has written, "My struggle is one of my kids who is very angry with Israel. I feel I love the land and the people, the current government, not so much. I couldn't find a way to bridge our feelings and have him have more compassion for October 7th and everything that's happened since." I would imagine that in your practice, you might run into this issue as well. How do
Yes.
we navigate this?
I mean, I think there are a few things. I think when it's a child, a parent-child relationship or a family relationship versus like for friendships, for example, that I think with the friendships, really evaluating, is this person trying to maintain our relationship and really try to understand my perspective and how I feel, and I'm trying to understand theirs, and we're trying to find a bridge? Or are they in a space of wanting to debate with me, judge
Mm,
me, tell me I'm wrong? If it's about that, um, then it's very difficult to salvage the relationship if there's not an underpinning of wanting to connect and understand. I think with children, most of us want to maintain our relationship with our children and a close relationship. So I think the goal is really connecting through empathy there,
hmm.
even if whatever they're saying and whatever they're feeling is abhorrent to you and confusing to you and scary to you, um, you do want to try to listen to whatever it is they're feeling without judgment, or at least without expressing it openly, but
Hmm.
but really leading with curiosity to understand the root of where this is coming from. Like, what are your friends saying at school? What are you hearing about this? What are you seeing about this? What are you reading about this? What is your TikTok saying?
Hmm.
Um, and then validating their emotions, I think is the easiest way to make someone still feel tethered to you, is to say, I can understand how you feel that way. That must be really hard. How can I better understand your feelings around this, or what it's like to be a Jewish person now feeling this way? Um, and then I think nuance is important. So much is binary in the world right now. So much feels black and white. You know, you're a Zionist, you're an anti-Zionist, you love Israel, you hate Israel. Um, you know, you're colonizers, you're not colonized. It's very, and where is the nuance in all of that?
Right.
Or these people are good, these people are bad. So understanding that actually the truth is often somewhere in the middle, and trying to connect with those nuances.
Hmm.
Um, and really like thinking about what our Jewish values are and trying to connect with our values in those moments. Like what does tikkun olam mean? What does that mean to you now? Before October 7th, after October 7th? I mean, I think for myself, I can say that Jewish value for me used to be very much outward facing, which was
Hmm.
like helping everybody else. And after October 7th, in various ways, I was like, oh wow, our people really need help now. I want to focus on the mental health of the Jewish people right now. So what does that mean to you in this moment? And again, like really fostering critical thinking that your social media and headlines and also the social pressure you experience as a young adult now is so intense, and how much of this is driven by that and a need for social acceptance. Everybody wants to be in the in group. Many of us are in the out group right now,
Hmm.
Jewishly, for our beliefs. That is hard for someone trying to fit into the world and figure out who they are in the world. Um, so really just acknowledging like if you're 18 to 25 right now as a Jewish person in America, that is very difficult. And I think many of us in older generations, myself included, had a very different experience being a Jewish young adult in America.
Hmm.
I don't know if that answers the question a little bit.
I feel like I'm almost hearing a suggestion to embrace the ambiguity. Would you say that's correct? The world is trying to paint this black and white, good, bad, evil,
And just that,
benevolent.
and that we would just the most important thing is to keep the door open with our children. I
Hmm.
think once the doors are closed or once they feel unheard, misunderstood, rejected, not accepted, not welcome, then it's very difficult to find a pathway back.
That's important. I'm seeing a few comments and questions in the chat that mirror one that I had for you as well, referring to the Jewish community in particular and the ruptures that many of us have been experiencing, whether or not your synagogue has become more Zionist or anti-Zionist, ruptures within the community, different opinions about Netanyahu or the wars. And that's really challenging. It's one thing when it's Jew and non-Jew, but it's within your Jewish community, seeing that become fractured in the post-October 7th world is also an experience that many of us are having. What suggestions do you have for those of us that are dealing with that right now? That seems to me as a particularly lonely place and a difficult one to be in.
Shelly, I'll let you take it.
Um, so it's a similar, there's the fractures are for some fractures, like what Jess was saying, but related, expanding it or extrapolating it um to like your social settings and friendships. It's a decision with your friends and colleagues. You can create more distance. You can choose not to engage as much if that's what feels comfortable for you. You can also choose to not engage on this particular topic if that feels comfortable for you.
Mhm.
Friends provide lots of different friends provide different um joys and stimulation and connection to us in our lives. And so, I live in a very progressive neighborhood. I have many non-Jewish friends. Um, and the ones that I've kept have been kind and supportive, even if they disagree.
Mm.
Or I don't know how they feel about it, but when we have a rally in town to support a local Jewish business person who's been harassed for being a Jewish business person, they show up. because they don't, whether they like Israel or don't like Israel is not relevant in that part of the conversation. And we can, for me personally, I think that everybody's different. If you're willing and able to have a conversation about politics in your community, if that's something that you feel comfortable doing and you have information that feels like enough to buoy you through a conversation that could become confrontational or misinformed or disinformed, then then you can go for it, right? Like I have a Palestinian American neighbor whose family is very, involved in UN like resolutions against Israel. And I enjoy those conversations. I really like, I'm very curious to hear the other perspective. Um, but there are a lot of people that I won't talk to anymore. And part of it is because they don't it I was too disappointed in how virulently they were spreading ideas about Jews and Israel and misinforming the public in a way that I thought was I truly I just lost respect for them. But so that's a very long answer, but friends are a little different because friends are in our lives to enrich our experience and bring, yes, growth and challenge, but joy also. And if you don't feel supported in those situations, then maybe it's okay to step back.
Hmm.
I'll just say with colleagues, I know a lot of people who've just sort of colleagues who were once more than colleagues and then became very anti-Israel and anti-Semitic in certain ways, maybe even unknowingly. A lot of the times people just say, okay, we're work people, we're colleagues, and I don't need to be buddy buddy or talk about deep things with colleagues. Um,
Oh,
that's okay.
I just wanted to also dovetail on what Shelly was saying about her neighbor and those conversations. I think one other piece to add to that is like know thyself.
Hmm.
And by that I mean know how your nervous system works. If your nervous system is getting dysregulated by these conversations, and you're finding yourself anxious or you're feeling certain things in your body, your chest is tightening, you're hyperventilating, you're sweating, you're feeling panicked, you're feeling attacked, unsafe, and everyone's different on the spectrum there. That's something you should probably not engage in. Certainly, Shelly and I even are different that way. I hear
Hmm.
about some conversations she has, and I'm like, oh no, I would never do that. It's too much for me. So I think knowing yourself is so important in that way, what you can and can't tolerate. Um, and also with friendships, I think, I heard a patient of mine who lost is Israeli American, who lost many of her friends, actually almost all of her friends after October 7th. Um, she was really trying to maintain the connections and she started to think of them in like tiers. Okay, they were my inner circle. I could trust them with everything. They accepted my full self. Okay, now that they're not there. And so trying to figure it out that way, in the end, she she stopped trying to save the friendships when it started really trying to hurt her. Because I think, as I was describing before, she kept trying to explain and build bridges, and they just were not hearing it and they weren't interested. It was this group think, you're either with us or against us, and if you don't go to our side, we will not accept you. And I think we all want to be accepted by the people in our lives. We all want to feel seen and heard and loved for our full selves. And the hope is that we can, even if we disagree with people in our lives, that they accept the whole of us and
Hmm.
and they love the whole of us. And so And I think that's something after October 7th we've really tried to cultivate is like, can we have people in our lives who accept our full selves?
And what would you say to somebody who kind of takes stock of that and feels that the answer is no, or very few? I'm sure there are many people feeling this way. What would you suggest for them, somebody in that position?
Shelly, you can take it.
Um, I'm sorry. To be honest, I was reading the chat and I got
Okay.
distracted.
Ask the question again, or I'll take it.
I was just so Jess was saying that, I think a lot of us have since October 7th and the war and everything that's happened here in the US and in North America and around the world, have taken stock of our friendships and
Mhm.
realizing these are the people I can be my full self with. And maybe there's
Mhm.
a lot of people who I can't be, and maybe letting some of those friendships or relationships go. But I was just in response to what she said, I thought, well, I'm sure there are people out there who kind of do this accounting and find that they don't really have a core of people that they can be them full selves with. I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying about building new traditions, finding your people. If you feel like you're starting at square one or zero, where do you go?
So I think first you go inside and you
Hmm.
really know, you learn what matters to you, right? And if and what you're describing is a very lonely, lonely place.
Hmm.
Um, I think that is so much of where, even if you're not religious, but it's like a very practicing Jew, I think um, it's somewhere that our tradition really can guide us. There are, again, the rituals, finding things that give you a sense of purpose.
Hmm.
So going back to, what Hirsch told people, and it's born out of Viktor Frankl's writings post his experience in the Holocaust, and um, it's when you can figure out what is important to you, what is your why, then you find other people with a similar why, right? And if looking at a nuanced perspective is part of your why, you know, everybody lives in different communities. So I understand, like, if you don't have a very large Jewish community, or um, then certainly, we have the great benefit of things like this.
Hmm.
Like, we're connected to 105 people from what seems like around the globe interested in the same topic. And certainly, um, this is a way to connect. Finding other opportunities like this. If you, I'm going to do a little plug for Gesher, because I think, Gesher and other opportunities like it, like we, we provide therapy referrals to Jews who want access to a safe, vetted, and trained Jewish therapist. The only reason I'm saying that is because that might be a good place to begin,
Right.
right? If you're feeling lonely, if you're trying to figure out what's important to you, that's part of what we do in a therapeutic relationship. And if you can do it with a therapist who understands what it means to be Jewish in this very difficult, uncertain, and ambiguous world, that could be a good first step. And, Jess and I are flexible too. If we get, a stream of requests for a support group or a process group, we'll make that happen, right?
That sounds great. Thank you. No, I can't believe it. Time is really flying by. We are just about 5 minutes out from the end of our time together. And I just wanted to ask you one final question about probably the best known, most used Jewish strategy for coping with trauma is humor. Um, can we talk a little bit about that? And why is this such a time-honored Jewish tool in our toolkit? And what role can it play in our lives right now?
Wow, that's
Do
a
you want me
great question.
I can I can take I can start and then Jess, why don't you jump in? Um, so humor is actually known to be one of the most like high level coping strategies and defense mechanisms. But defense mechanism, I don't want to like suggest that a defense mechanism is only a bad thing. A defense mechanism is developed as a way of helping us cope and utilize whatever resilience we have. So, humor is this beautiful way of simultaneously acknowledging that something difficult is happening or something, in like lay terms, like something messed up is going on.
Mhm.
And we can laugh about it. We can release some of the stress through laughter. We can create, it's another way of playing and using our imagination because it's not just stating straight out what's happening, but it's also like adjusting the knowledge and the information to make it less intense, right? It allows us to address the situation, address the problem, but without getting deep and heavy necessarily, and without becoming too vulnerable, but acknowledging it. It's not denial. It's a way that we can laugh together, which bonds us. It's a way that we can sort of feel the trauma or the sadness together again without being overwhelmed by it.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. As you were talking, I'm noticing that some new connections are being made in the chat on this program. So that just really warms my heart. And I think we're kind of resilience or post-traumatic growth in action here, right? That's what we're doing. We're coming together, we're thinking, we're talking, we're sharing. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm feeling a little bit buoyed by this conversation. I'm feeling a little bit stronger myself. So really, thank you so much to all of you for being here, and especially to our fabulous doctors for being here. I just wanted to say, again, thank our psychologists who've been so generous with the time, and to reiterate that if you all want to learn more about their work at Gesher Community Care, which is a nonprofit psychotherapy referral service dedicated to connecting the Jewish community to safe, supportive, and culturally responsible therapists, you can reach out to Gesher at geshercc.org for more information, or you can follow them on Instagram at Gesher Community Care or Gesher CC. This has been a really wonderful discussion. I really wish we could keep going. It's nice to see that people in the chat are saying thank you. I feel I'm glad to know that I'm not alone. And I think that is really a fabulous takeaway we can take from tonight is that, we are not alone and that there are other people who are feeling the same things we are. And we can be here for each other. So I just
And watch some Mel Brooks.
that is always a good cure. Anything else? Any other hot takes, quick tips for ways to feel better tonight? If we want to think about this and feel good, Mel Brooks is a good one. Do you have any other go-to pick-me-ups in times of distress that you'd like to share?
6 second hug apparently elevates the oxytocin, reduces
Oh.
the cortisol. It's like kangaroo care for grown-ups.
Yeah. Or, and similarly, someone who you've been wanting to pick up the phone and call for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
haven't, and you want to connect with, pick up the phone.
That's a great idea. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you
Thank you,
all for
everyone.
being here. And also thank you to UJA Federation of New York for making this program possible. I'm really grateful to have spent this hour with you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everybody.